First item, Board of Commissioners 2025-0273, all commission districts public hearing regarding intent to opt out of House Bill 581. May we first hear from staff, please? Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. I know you've received the presentation and multiple memos about this, so I'm going to try to summarize where we are. House Bill 581 provides a statewide exemption that will automatically apply to DeKalb unless you opt out via Agenda Item 2025-0272, passing the opt-out resolution that is on page 9 of your agenda. The CEO and administration are recommending that you vote no to that item to allow the county to keep its existing exemption and continue with a safety net, if you will, of the statewide homestead exemption as a backup. That would require no action on your part, but because you've placed on the agenda on page 10, item 2025-0271, to memorialize your reasoning for opting in, then you should vote yes to that item and document why. To be clear, the tax commissioner will apply the most beneficial exemption should we opt in and have both DeKalb's current exemption and a backup statewide exemption. If the county's exemption expires in 2033, and for any reason we need to default to the statewide exemption, it would be in place because you've opted in to provide some relief to our taxpayers. And for the sake of the public, I recognize you commissioners all realize this. By opting in, we would have two exemptions, and the tax commissioner by law would have to apply the one that is most beneficial to the taxpayer. And if we ever lost the DeKalb exemption, the fallback default would be the statewide by opting in, and that's the recommendation from the administration.
All right, so just to confirm, attorney, please. So the recommendation from the administration is to opt in.
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you, sir. All righty. Next, if we've got anyone who would like to speak in support of this item, please. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak in support or favor of this item?
Madam Presiding Officer, we've had such a turnout today. There is an overflow room. COO Williams is going to check to see if there are any speakers in the overflow room for this item. And while he does that, I'll just announce to you, after this item, we may need to give the people who came for House Bill 581 an opportunity to make room for others or invite others who are here for other public hearing items, zoning and some of the items like the gentleman spoke earlier. Give them an opportunity to come in so you can hear what they have to offer.
Okay, great. While Mr. Williams is checking the overflow, also, sir, please check the hallway. Sir, were you trying to come forward to speak? Go ahead. And Madam Clerk, if you'd please start the clock. And we do have 10 minutes, correct? 5 minutes? 5 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jean Cassius, 6075 Shadow Lake Way. And I'm in support of opting in, and reason being it gives us an alternative, and at the end of the day is whichever one works best for the homeowners is what the county is obligated to apply. And the question I have, I guess, for the county is whether or not we've done a comparison study just to see the difference between the two plans, but I am in favor of supporting.
Sir, if you could come back to the podium. So we just want to make sure that everybody up here is crystal clear. I know the language is a little confusing. So you're in favor of opting out or opting in?
In.
Opting in, okay.
To give us two options instead of just the county option.
Great, thank you. All right, we still have some time left on our clock. Is anyone else here to speak in support or favor of this item? Is anyone here to speak in favor of opting out? All righty. Oops, there we go. Thank you so much.
Good morning. My name
Good
is
morning.
Marsha Jones. I live at 4318 Dogwood Trail, Decatur, Georgia. I wasn't clear. I was thinking there was a meeting about HB 581 this morning. I didn't know we could speak about it. From the meetings that I've attended, I feel that we should opt out from the information I received from the meetings, that we would lose autonomy of our funds and so forth. I have not a lot of knowledge about it, but I am in favor of opting out.
Great, thank you so much. Do we have anyone else here in favor of opting out? Or in support of opting out? Welcome, thank you so much for being with us.
My name is Barbara McNeil. My address is 3090 Kings Bay Drive. Actually, I don't feel that I know enough about the opting in or the opting out. I got the impression that by opting out, we would, as residents, have to start paying a higher tax, real estate tax. I am a real estate agent, and that homestead exemption is something that I know my buyers are very anxious and always, I make sure that they register for it. I really feel as a citizen, I do not have enough information about the opting in or the opting out. I've heard some new information here today that kind of makes me wonder which way I should be thinking. Is there some way we could get some kind of clarification as to how these two things would impact us as taxpayers?
Thank you very much. Great point. There will be an opportunity for our county attorney to speak to that towards the end. And so if you would please, Terry, address some of the questions you hear.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, thank you.
Hi, good morning. My name is
Good morning.
Esther Love, and I live at 4177 Sherwood Oaks Drive. I did attend one of the meetings regarding 581B with the county attorney and the Madam CEO, and it was a very detailed meeting explaining opting in, opting out. It took me some time to fully understand it, and I don't know that I did, but what I did understand is that it's going to be a cost to the county, and that the county is not able to readily implement it in the time that they have been given to get it done. So I'm in favor of opting out because there will be, I don't think it's going to be as beneficial to us at this particular time. So I vote to opt out.
Thank you for expressing your opinion. Anyone else in favor or support of opting out? We have a little bit of time left on our clock. Thank you very much, Ms. O'Neill.
Yes, Jocelyn O'Neill, Greater Towers. From the meetings that we've had, I'm still a little foggy about understanding the benefits because I thought the e-host was set up to help us with our property taxes, and then we have the splosh. So I'm still a little foggy about this. And from them to say that our tax commissioner would be the one who would make the decision on which is the best for our properties, how can that happen?
Thank you, Ms. O'Neill. We have time left on our clock for anybody else who would like to speak in favor or support of opting out of House Bill 581. Please come to the podium. Welcome.
Hi, how y'all doing? Thank you for this opportunity. I am in favor. However, as I was speaking to two of the assistants of District 3 and 7, as I was explaining, I think for us in DeKalb County, we need better education of items that are coming up or anything that's coming up, because I think a lot of, in my opinion, and I'm still confused like a whole lot of other people, we didn't understand what the vote meant. And not only just for that particular item, anything that we are to vote on, it would be greatly appreciated if the commissioners would have a town hall to tell us, we're voting, this is on the ballot. Item 1 means Item 1, a vote yes means this, a vote no means this. And I think I can talk for a lot of residents in DeKalb County. We didn't know what we were voting on. We had to gather information on our own, or we gathered information from other people sending us stuff. And whether it was correct that they sent us, we didn't know because it was coming from all different places. But if you all would take that under your hand and educate us when new things are coming up so we won't go through all this disinformation and confusion.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Ma'am, just for clarification, you are supporting opting out, correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, we've exhausted our time for those in favor of opting out. Now, if we could hear from folks who oppose opting out, who are against opting out of House Bill 581. Thank you very much.
Good morning.
Good
My name
morning.
is Audrey. I have two homes in DeKalb County. I have 3 children. They're all graduates out of DeKalb County school systems, going on to get their doctorate degree and things of that nature. Redan High School, DeKalb Early College Academy, and Lithonia High School. So I'm a proud DeKalb resident. It's been over 30-something years. I think DeKalb County government needs to do a better job with being transparent. That's the first thing. And then also, too, with the communication. A lot of people are here today out of fear because we don't understand the language and that's opting in, opting out. All we want to know is, our taxes going to be raised? Which one will cause our taxes to be raised? Because some of us are paying close to $1,000 extra on mortgages if we do have mortgages. And if we do have a HOA, we're paying extra on that because of the increase in the water bill. We want to know which one is going to increase our taxes. Why can't y'all just be plain in layman's terms and tell us which one is going to raise our taxes? The third thing is, like the gentleman explained earlier, I like his math and everything. If we had to pay this usage fee and we have a slush fund, why isn't that money being returned to the DeKalb County residents to help us out with these various bills and things of that nature? The fourth thing, where is all this money that we're paying in our taxes that's supposed to be for schools, supposed to be for sidewalks and things of that nature? Where is all the money? Where is all the money going to? So tell us, first and foremost, which one is going to raise our taxes. Then we can be able to come up here and say opt in or opt out. Tell us which one is going to raise our taxes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker, who is speaking in opposition to opting out of House Bill 581. And reminder, there's 2 minutes and 36 seconds left.
Yes, good morning. My name is Louise Tomlinson, and I just want to say that I have heard, even sitting outside, that there are many voices expressing concern over not understanding all of the details and parameters of the state exemption or any of the provisions that exist already. And that's understandable, but I am feeling that what I heard since sitting outside that really locks it for me is the statement to the effect that the tax commissioner will always be legally bound to choose the route that will be the most beneficial to the residents of the county. And so that is my reason for saying that I would opt in, that I'm in favor. It is simply that as long as the tax commissioner is legally bound to choose the one that is most beneficial to the residents, then it would be a good thing to always have the state exemption program available as a backup. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. We have 1 minute and 14 seconds left. Thank you.
Good morning, Linda Hagan. I'm neither in favor or opposed. I came to seek information about House Bill 581, and I guess I'm looking for the commission to guide us whether we should go back to Governor Kemp and our General Assembly to inform the constituents that affect DeKalb County residents. I'm a licensed broker here in DeKalb County. I've been selling real estate for 27 years. It's vital, and the more information that we can have, the better for all the residents. Thank you.
Thank you. 35 seconds left for another speaker. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Linda Bell. I live on Adams Street. I don't know which side I'm on. I wanted to know where the tax money goes. Is it being spent wisely? I've been fighting the water department since September about a water meter. Before that, I had tried to get their attention because I knew it was installed improperly. But in September, I got a bill for $800 after my bill was normally about $19. And all I got from the desk people in the department was patronizing. Well, you have to pay your bill. We'll set up a program for you so you can pay your bill. It's obviously a leak. Well, it turns out it wasn't a leak. It turns out it was the meter, and it was installed.
Thank you so much for your comments, ma'am, and I'm terribly sorry to interrupt you, but the gentleman on your left, actually, they're coming up behind you there to help you out.
You give me a call. We'll get this.
Thank you so much.
So,
all right, and Mr. Williams, thank you for addressing that for us as well. Okay, next we'd like to hear again from our Deputy County Attorney. And again, there were some questions I wanted to make sure you address. First, is that opting out means this, expand on that. Opting in means that, expand on this. Third, what is the impact on our taxes? And fourth, if you please discuss other active bills under the Gold Dome right now related to House Bill 581. Would you like me to repeat those four?
I think I have them.
All right.
You want to hear what opting out means, secondly, what opting in means, thirdly, what that means for our taxpayers, and finally, reference other bills about House Bill 581 that are currently in the General Assembly.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right. If the county opts out of House Bill 581, the statewide floating homestead exemption will not apply in DeKalb County. The county's base year exemption will continue whether we opt in or opt out. The key to opting out is we will never get the benefit of the statewide homestead exemption, which under the right circumstances would be applied to a homeowner's tax bill, freezing their property value as early as 2024. And in the future, their values going up because the property's worth more would not be taxed. That would not be available in DeKalb if we were to opt out. If we opt in, we still keep our base year exemption that is DeKalb's, just like opting out. But what could also be applied is the statewide exemption. DeKalb's exemption came in 2007, freezing values as early as 2006. So someone who has their property assessed in 2008, for example, and they had a homestead, we have been taxing them on the 2008 value. Here in 2023, 2024, their property was very likely worth much, much more, but that increased value was not taxed because of our base year freeze. If in 2023, when our freeze is scheduled to end, it could be extended if certain things happen under the law, but if our freeze were to end, the fallback by opting in would be the application of the state's floating homestead exemption. And that would move values up to 2024 or so it would be a little higher, but the exemption would apply and our taxpayers would get the benefit of that exemption. The discussion you've heard about what the tax commissioner must do comes out of House Bill 581's language that says the tax commissioner is supposed to assess which of those two, should we opt in, is most beneficial. In other words, which one gives the biggest break to the taxpayer, and that's the one that would be applied, okay? With respect to what it really means for our taxpayers, because of the year that our base year, DeKalb County's base year tax exemption started, values in 2006, it started in 2007, those with a homestead would very likely have the DeKalb County exemption applied. The other exemption would be available as a default if for some reason in 2023 it were to go away. It would be a backup to provide some semblance of relief to our taxpayers. If we opted out and we lost the DeKalb exemption, they would not have any exemption at that point, as the law is currently written and as our current circumstances stand. There are a host of things that could happen with the General Assembly. There are a host of things that could go to referendum to change the circumstances between now and that time in 2033. But as you've asked, Madam Presiding Officer, I'll speak to what I understand to be some current legislation considered by the General Assembly. Number one, all of the agencies, that is every school district, every city, and every county in the state of Georgia, had to make a decision by March 1st. They have to deliver to the governor a resolution opting out, show that they had 3 public hearings, and advertise them properly if they were to opt out. That made it a very rapid time to make that decision. So there is a bill that contemplates extending that. Whether or not it will pass, whether or not it still has any traction, that bill exists. Another bill that is contemplated is referred to as the HB 581 Fix Bill. There were unintended consequences in this bill, and there is just some cleanup to correct some things that weren't intended. The most important example for DeKalb County is there is a 2-cent ceiling on local option sales taxes. They changed the exemptions to that ceiling. In DeKalb, we have eHost, SPLOST, eSPLOST, and MARTA. MARTA was not counting against us, and eSPLOST was not counting against us, thus our ability to have eHost and SPLOST. MARTA would now count against us such that we could not have a SPLOST 3 or continue eHost. Our current base year exemption continues as long as we have SPLOST and eHost. That is why the year is 2033. The SPLOST 2 is supposed to go to roughly 2030, and then the clock would start ticking on the timeline for our base year exemption, which takes us to 2033. Commissioners, I realize you guys recognize this and you're asking me to do this to share it with the public. This is very complex and I've tried to simplify it. I think the overall theme, as I took it, Madam Presiding Officer, our taxpayers want to know, is this going to make my taxes go up? And if not, what is it going to do? And the short answer, in my opinion, is this provides, House Bill 581 provides another layer of possible exemption to reduce a property owner's taxes. That's really what it does. It should not make anyone's tax go up. It should, in fact, make their tax go down if we ever needed to rely on it, or if the tax commissioner found the need to apply it to a taxpayer's property. Are there any more questions, ma'am?
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Just one more time, please repeat the recommendation from the administration for this item.
The administration recommends that the county opt in, which means you would vote against the opt-out resolution. You would adopt your opt-in resolution, which is not required, but I know you want to memorialize your reasoning. And I understand the fundamental reasoning to be so that your taxpayers in DeKalb County have the default benefit of the statewide exemption behind the county's existing exemption. And both would be available to ensure some exemption is applied to taxpayers.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. So again, just to reread the item 0273, this is a public hearing regarding intent to opt out of House Bill 581. First, we'll take a motion and a second, and then we'll open it up to discussion to commissioners. Do we have a motion?
Yes, Madam Chair, motion to withdraw this item, is that correct? We're doing, okay, motion to withdraw.
Do we have a
Not
second?
comment.
Second.
All right, as it's open to discussion now, Commissioner Terry has requested to speak.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I want to just commiserate with our neighbors and members of the public who are here who have found this to be very confusing. I also have found it very confusing. Of course, as we all know, the legislature passed this last legislative session, the voters voted on it, and over the last several months, the law department has been trying to figure out what is the best option for continuing the homestead exemption for DeKalb County homeowners. And so the reason why I'm supporting withdrawing this item is that I do not support opting out. Later in the agenda, we'll be having an agenda item to opt in symbolically. But to just be very clear, the DeKalb e-host, which is the language we're all familiar with because we see it on our tax bill, that e-host tax credit, that is a better deal for the taxpayer than the statewide exemption. And in a lot of ways, the legislature copied DeKalb County e-host. So bottom line, DeKalb e-host is better. However, if for something happened in the future and e-host went away, now that we're opting in, we got the statewide exemption as a backstop. And I'm sure that the tax commissioner, and once they get all their new computer equipment, they will do their best to determine what's the best. However, we do believe that the e-host will continue to be the best simply because of that freeze on the assessment. That's the key factor here, is the freeze on your assessment does not change with with inflation. It is a freeze. That is the best advantage for the e-host tax credit. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Terry. Next up is Commissioner Messiah, then Davis Johnson, then Bolden. Thank you.
And if we could have someone from legal to Attorney Phillips. And so we had a question from the audience regarding speaking with anyone from the General Assembly and what they may push or should push, or the discussions they should have. Can you speak briefly to House Bill 92 that recently passed in the House that is presently before the Senate?
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Martha Ravello, Chief of Intergovernmental Affairs. So I am working with Dan at the General Assembly on these different bills. So I want to just
explain who Dan is.
Dan Baskerville. He's with Denton's, and he's our lobbyist at the General Assembly. So I have my notes. I'm currently with House Bill 92. It did pass the House this week, and it will be heard in the Senate Finance Committee which was heard yesterday on Monday. This bill, again, was revised for the third time and now includes the following provisions. To opt-out deadline will now be extended until March 31st, 2025. This will allow local governments that have opted out to opt back in by March 31st. So if they did opt out by March 1st, you're allowed to go back in March 31st. Again, this is a bill. I just want to make sure this is not confusing to anyone, because I know that currently we have all these deadlines going on, and so we want to make sure that you understand that this is still going through the General Assembly. There's other provisions that include the 5-acre limitation on the floating homestead exemption, clarifying that there is a surviving spouse that will continue the exemption without reapplication, allowing the taxpayer to apply for homestead exemptions during their 45-day appeal, and requiring the estimated rollback rate to be provided to the Board of the Tax Assessors. Again, this is House Bill 92. Originally, it had different language that included opting out by 2029, but that now has changed. This is a good opportunity for us to continue these conversations if we do decide to stay in. But having said that, there is no guaranteed. We will actually be talking about this today at 2 p.m. Myself and Dan will be speaking on this bill in committee. But yes, do you have any other questions?
Sales tax.
Not related to that. I appreciate it. You did a great job in explaining that to the public so that they can be aware of what's presently on the floor. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Davis Johnson, then Bolton.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. The first one is what effect would House Bill 581 have on the EHOs if we opt out or if we opt in? I mean, what effect would it have on the EHOs?
It will have no effect on EHOS whether we opt in or opt out.
Okay. My second question, I think that this bill was passed in the General Assembly unanimously by a nonpartisan vote. Is that correct, or am I incorrect on that?
I don't know what the vote was in the Assembly. Maybe Ms. Ravello could speak to that?
It was passed.
She said yes, it was.
So it was passed by Democrats and Republicans?
Yes.
Unanimously?
Ms. Ravello's indicating
Okay.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Bolton, thank you for your comments.
Thank you, Madam PO. And I'd just like you, Mr. Attorney, to reiterate so that it's clear for the folks in the room. If we were to have to, for any reason, transition from DeKalb's exemption to the state, because it's based on your property value has changed during that period of time, you may see an increase, but it's not because we've increased your taxes.
Yes, the only way that would apply, Commissioner Bolton, is if the county were to lose the county's exemption. So if the county's exemption were to expire in 2033, which we obviously hope it does not, if that were to happen, we would have as a default position the statewide exemption. And the difference is the county's exemption freezes values as early as 2006. Those values go up over time, as we all know, but the county's not taxing you on the appreciation of your property. The state exemption freezes values starting at 2024, so that would be a higher value, but that exemption would apply starting as early as 2034, and it would be better than no exemption at all, which is why the recommendation is to have it as a default position by opting in.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure everybody in the room knows if we had to default to the state and you see an increase, it's not because we're taxing you more. Your properties are just valued higher.
Now, there's one point of clarity I'd
Go
like
ahead.
to offer, Madam Presiding Officer, if I've
Sure.
entertained all the questions. You have on your agenda 3 items that address House Bill 581. This was merely the public hearing and does not require a vote on this item. I know Commissioner Terry mentioned withdrawing it. Technically, you don't have to, though you could, but you've heard from your constituents, and I know you've listened carefully. You do have on your agenda later item 2025-0272. The administration's recommendation is that you would vote no to that item and not opt out, so that we won't get the benefit of the statewide exemption as a default backup to the counties. You would vote yes to 2025-0271 so that you have that default backup, and we would prepare a resolution for your execution, just documenting that you're doing it to have the backup and support your constituents so they wouldn't be faced with no exemption at all should we lose our base year. And I understand the current intention is we'd like to keep our the DeKalb County base year exemption, and there's no indication that anybody's against having that. But if we unfortunately lost it, that statewide would be a default backup position.
Mr. Phillips, I think we just want to make sure we're all crystal clear here. Do you want us to take action on this item?
There's no need for you to
No.
take action on this
Okay.
item.
Okay.
There are 2 others that you will have
Understood.
to take action on.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Patrick has comments, and then we'll move on to Commissioner Johnson.
All right, if you wouldn't mind, Terry Phillips, please stay with us.
Sure.
So we have heard a lot of back and forth, which to the public may make it more confusing. But essentially, whether we opt in, if we opt in, it's a belts and suspenders approach. The belt is we still have the 2026 exemption or freeze. The suspender is years down the road, should things change and we no longer have the 2026 option, we now have the 2006 option. We now have the 2024 as the backup, the suspenders, to make sure that at the end of the day, there's not going to be this large jump in property taxes. Is that a fair statement?
You are correct. The county's exemption is the 2006 exemption,
Right.
because that's the first year value that the county could use. The 2024 value is the statewide backup suspenders that you're referencing. And yes, the way you described it is right. It is a default position, and opting in would allow us to have the benefit of both.
Okay. And so either way, residents should be assured between now and, let's say, 2033, there is no talk of any massive increase because the freeze is gone.
Correct.
Correct.
As I've understood it, the county's desire, the governing authority, the commissioners and our CEO would like the county to have the ability to have a referendum so our voters could vote on SPLOST 3, and we could keep our base year exemption. In the alternative, we could ask our General Assembly to allow our voters to extend our base year exemption. But I've heard no indication that anyone's interested in the county losing its exemption. It's just that currently it does have an expiration date.
Right.
So this is a default position that's being taken advantage of, if you will.
Right, and we're sort of looking years into the future to make sure that we're still protected
That's
when it
right.
comes to that freeze. The next question would be for Martha Ravello, if you don't mind coming up, please. Good morning, good to see you. So you referenced some activities going on at the legislature right now.
Yes.
In those, and I apologize if I didn't hear that clearly, we are asking, though, to make sure that between MARTA, eHost, and SPLOST, we are able to maintain those in the 2030 election that would be coming up to sort of reaffirm eHost as well as SPLOST. Is that correct?
That is correct.
That is correct. Okay. Thank you very much. So, oftentimes with government, we try and make things better, or the state tries to make things better for us, and then it gets a little bit confusing. So I hope from the questions that my colleagues and I have been asking, as well as from Martha Ravello, Attorney Terry Phillips, I hope that this is clearer for everyone. No matter what, we're not losing a freeze. The property tax freeze that has been in place since 2006, 2007 timeframe will continue. The question is what happens in the future, 2033, and as Martha has shared with us, the county is fighting to make sure that we can continue on with some variation of eHost and SPLOST and MARTA going into the future. So with that, thank you very much, Commissioners.
Thank you, Commissioner Patrick. Next up is Commissioner Johnson, and then we have follow-up questions from Commissioner Davis Johnson and Commissioner Terry.
Ms. Martha, my question is a continuation of Commissioner Patrick's. I was concerned about the 2% cap, and I know as it stands, that is the biggest chance we have of losing eHost if legislation does not take action to allow us to have an additional SPLOST. And I know they're working on it, but can you give us more information on the possibility or what you're seeing?
Yeah, so just to clarify, whether we opt in or opt out, it doesn't really matter.
Correct.
We still are facing the MARTA
Correct.
tax issue.
Correct.
So we do have time. So till 2029, and then the extension until 2033, as you mentioned, Commissioner Patrick. Having said that, we started working really early. So it's been over a month now with the chair of the Ways and Means Committee on the House side, and he has been very supportive because, again, this is an unintended consequence that was made last year during session in which I actually was there. So I understand that the intention was to include every county that has MARTA, but because of this is why we're working towards making that quick fix. The bill was already introduced, and so I think we are in good shape as far as I know, and we may get something done this session. I'm very hopeful. If not, we do have time. We have next year. But again, this is unintended, and they are aware of that as well. So we will be speaking on the language today.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you for your questions and comments. Commissioner Davis Johnson, then Terry.
Okay, mine is brief. I want you to, I know one of the ladies that came up wanted the explanation in very elementary terms.
Yes, ma'am.
And so if we opt in, the tax commissioner would be required by law to give us the lowest tax exempt option available. Is that correct?
That is what is stated in the language of House Bill 581, yes.
Okay.
And it is not discretionary. The tax commissioner must give the lower.
He must give us the lowest tax rate. That's if we opt in. And our lowest tax rate in DeKalb is at the 2006 tax year. Is that?
In theory, yes. It would be a home valued, being assessed at the value from 2006 would be lower than the value in 24.
Yeah. And so if we opted out, we would not have the option of receiving the home value of 2006. It would be the home value, the floating home value, which would start in 2024. Is that correct?
Commissioner, it's actually the opposite. If we opt out, we will continue with the 2006 values as you described it. If we opt in, we will continue with the 2006 values. Where the difference comes is in 2033. If we were to lose the 2006 value exemption, then we would have the state as a default and would move to the 2024 value exemption.
Oh, okay.
And if we were to opt out, we would not have any exemption at that point. Which is why, that's right.
No exemption.
No exemption at all. That's why the recommendation from the administration is that we would take, to borrow from Commissioner Patrick's language, the suspenders and add it to our belt so that our taxpayers would have the benefit of both.
Okay, and that would be opting
in. Correct.
Okay, I think that's as elementary as you can get. So thank you.
Commissioner Terry?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, and apologies. Later on our agenda, page 9, is the opt-out resolution, which I intend to support withdrawal of that opt-out resolution. And so related to the item I guess we're discussing now, I'm formally withdrawing my motion since we're not really we don't need to take action on a public hearing item. So motion withdrawn.
Okay, next is Commissioner Patrick.
Madam Presiding Officer, I know this is a little bit out of order. If you don't mind, I'd like to respectfully ask, if you're in the audience and you think you have a better understanding after what we've talked about, would you raise your hand? Okay. If I may suggest, I know we have the overflow room and we have folks in the hallway, if there is a staff person could just sort of poll people to see if they have a better understanding or not. And since we're going to have this 2 more times to talk about, then hopefully we can help get that critical information to the residents that may be on the fence or still unclear on a couple of things. So thank you, Madam Presiding Officer.
Of course, thank you. And so just to emphasize, Commissioner Patrick has requested someone from the administration to meet with folks, perhaps in the overflow room, to respond to questions. And then we will get to the 2 items related to this later in our agenda. Oh, CEO Cochran-Johnson, do you want to make a comment? Come on forward.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say that we have already held an impromptu meeting to explain HB 581. I think also this gives us an opportunity for improvement because there are probably around 80 individuals, I would say, that we have now centered into an overflow room and using IT, we have given them access. So hello, they are actually watching this meeting so that they can be a part of it. So moving forward, when we have items, I will send an email. That particular area and all areas of the building on the main level will televise all of the BOC meetings so that it serves as an area of overflow. I do want to say that last evening we had probably about 470 individuals.
Wow.
That came to Port of Sanford for the town hall. One of the issues that I'm finding is upon being asked or asking those that are outside in the overflow room, they're not receiving the DeKalb County newsletter. So what we're dealing with is a great deal of people who have not been given information because DeKalb County does not have access. So we have also circulated a sign-in sheet so that we can add them to the county newsletter so that in the future we will have greater participation. And we also need to make sure that we sync amongst ourselves, even if it means creating individual ads for newsletters so that we have maximum participation. There's just a lot of people that don't understand what's going on despite the notice and the series of town halls.
Great, thank you so much. So I would like to acknowledge on behalf of myself and everyone up here and express our appreciation for you hosting the two public hearings in advance of this third and final public hearing. So thank you so much. And there will be more to discuss on this item later in the agenda. Commissioners, any other questions or comments on this item? Nope. Okay. All right. Let's move on. So that was a lengthy discussion. We are now at the top of page 3, another very important agenda item, 2025, to adopt the 2025 annual budget. First, maybe we hear from staff.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the commission, excuse me. So this is our second public hearing on the 2025 budget. What you should have in front of you now is a substitute to the agenda item that incorporates both amendments coming from the CEO as well as amendments that were voted on through the FAB committee last Friday. And so I do think we have the presentation that we've done in the past, but we, depending on your pleasure, whether we would like to go through that presentation again, or would you prefer to just focus on the amendments at this point?
Commissioners, are y'all comfortable with the presentation? Okay, everybody? Okay, Commissioner Bolton doesn't have the handout. I don't think anybody has it. Does anyone? Oh, she does. Okay. Is it possible to get some printed versions of that? Oh, there they are. Fantastic. All right, so I believe everybody's in support of just going through the amendments. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you. So, and I'll give it just 1 minute while Mr. Williams passes that out. But the way that we've organized the table here is we have the CEO amendments first, followed by the FAB committee amendments. So some of the first items that you're going to see on the list for the CEO amendment are actually the budget for our grant funds, which were not budgeted in the original agenda item. So the reason is the grant funds work a little bit differently than the rest of the operating funds, where basically whenever a grant is accepted, that starts the budget for that grant period, and then there are, whenever the grant is accepted, that also triggers, a budget amendment for that grant fund. But based on state law, we do have to adopt an annual balanced budget for all of those funds. So what you'll see with that is just what the numbers represent is what the available balance was for each of those grants at the end of 2024, and that's the revenue amount, and then the expenditure amount just equals the revenue amount on all those. Moving down though, airport, the only change there is actually an increase in the revenue estimate, so $1.8 million increase to the revenue, and that's just based on actual revenues through the end of FY24. Confiscated funds, that's another one of the grant fund items. The next item on the list is Designated Services Fund, Transportation. This is the Memorial Drive LED lighting. That's $160,000. So that was an item approved in December of last year, and we added funds at that time. But because that was added so late in the year, it didn't carry over, so we're just adding those funds back to the 2025 budget. For the E911 system, we have a computer-aided dispatch upgrade, which is $124,000. And now we're moving into the general fund items. And so we have, for the Board of Commissioners, the ARP interest. So last year there was an agenda item to allocate the ARP interest to the Board of Commissioners, so an equal amount for each of the district offices. So the total amount is $4.5 million. And that'll be transferred from the ARP fund to the general fund and then split equally among all the committee or the commission districts. The next item is just equalizing the BOC budget for each of the districts, and that's not including the ARP funding, at $960,000 for each district. So in the original budget, there was some variation between the districts, which was unintentional, and this is just bringing up where every single district office will have $960,000 as their annual budget, and that includes the $300,000 for the reserve for appropriation.
So to be clear, up until this year, the $300,000 has been a separate line item, and you have
Correct.
merged them.
Right.
Thank you, sir. Proceed.
And I will mention there that that's a lot of what accounts for the change in the BOC budget from last year to this year, is that that funding was previously housed within the non-departmental budget, and it's been moved to the BOC budget just to allow commissioners greater control over those funds and making sure that they're distributed in a timely manner, and just kind of centralizing that within each district office. Okay, the next two items are for the CEO's office. The first is there was funding in the original budget for 2 grant writer positions. And based on everything that's going on in Washington right now, the decision was made by Madam CEO to hold off on those positions for the time being until we have a better grasp of what the climate will be as far as grant funds coming from the federal government. And then the second item, though, is funding for 2 other positions. One would be the Chief Housing Officer, and then the other would be a Chief Education Officer.
My apologies, TJ. I was speaking with Mr. Manson about our agenda. Can you go back to the grant items and why the $210,000 was backed out?
Sure. So basically, with all the changes taking place in Washington, D.C. under the Trump administration, we think it might be premature to fund those, just because we don't know what the climate will be in terms of what grant funding is even going to be available to the county. So we think those funds could be better utilized for other positions at this point.
Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm. All right, so the next item is those other positions I just referenced. So one is the Chief Housing Officer, and the second is the Chief Education Officer. And so the Chief Housing Officer would be responsible for any of our unhoused initiatives, as well as any just policy related to housing. And then the Chief Education Officer, they would really be serving more like a public education role. So I think we've heard today about a lot of the questions that the public had about HB 581. So they would be coordinating those efforts to really provide that information to the public about anything that's going on within DeKalb County government.
Some more community outreach, not
Correct.
related to our education system.
Correct.
Okay, thank you kindly. Commissioner Davis Johnson has a quick question.
How would the, and this may have been answered and I missed it, but how would the Chief Housing Officer interact with the Community Development Department, if at all?
Might allow Mr. Williams. If you want to.
So the Chief Housing Officer would interact with, all of our various departments. The housing officer would be a cabinet member, so he would be part of the executive team. There would certainly be ongoing conversations with Director Mitchell with the programs that he currently has, as well as potential expansion of programs. Same with the planning department and the variety of departments across the board, human services and such. So they would be complementary functions. But the housing officer would have a broader look beyond the constraints of the programming that is required under community development, CDBG, HUD, and so forth.
But it would be related either directly or indirectly to housing, since it's the
function would be housing, yes.
function would be.
The focus would be housing, affordable housing, assisting developing programs for the unhoused and such.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, the next two items on the CEO amendment list are for contributions to the, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Did you address the chief education officer?
Yeah, so that role would be to provide educational materials to the public about any initiatives that DeKalb County has going on, or information, such as, 581, being able to provide more information, have more public outreach about any issues that are, current issues for DeKalb County.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please continue, sir.
Okay. So the next two items are contributions from the general fund to the CIP fund. The first is $1,073,400, and so that's for renovation of an office space for the public defender. If you'll notice in the description there, though, this is rented office space, but the property owner will be reimbursing us $750,000 for any work that's done there. So the true cost will be just right around $300,000 to the county for that renovation. The next item is $1 million contribution to CIP, and that's for technology upgrades as part of the renovation of the Blue Auditorium. Then we're ready for the next item. It's the GIS department, and this is $237,000. That's for a scanning project, which was approved again late last year, and this is just providing the funding to cover that within their operating budget. After that, we have $385,000 for pre-employment physicals for the Human Resources Department. That item was a request in the original budget. At the time when we were looking at it, the actual expenditures were not, for FY24, seemed lower than that, but in the end, they came in much closer to what the request had been, so that's why we're recommending the funding at this point. The next item is $100,000 for human services, and that's part of the Embark program for the youth farm, excuse me. The next item is for IT, and so this funding was originally requested as part of the CIP plan, which I think we've discussed before during our budget discussions, that we had separated that from the operating budget because we were trying to develop a 5-year CIP that would be all-inclusive and include funds, that are not just the operating fund dollars that would be part of that. But based on a lot of the requests we got from other departments and just discussions with the new CIO about this, we're funding that request plus another $1 million within their operating budget. And that's going to allow us to then centralize a lot of the computer replacements under the umbrella of IT versus it being distributed or spread across the other departments in the county.
Just a quick question, Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Commissioner Terry.
Yes, and I think we talked about this before the meeting, but on Friday we had held several constitutional officers' requests for computer software things, and so is the goal to work with the constitutionals as well within this line item to meet their computer equipment and other software needs?
Yes, that is the goal here, is again to bring basically one pot of money for all the computer replacements throughout the county managed by the IT department but then they obviously would work with the departments to address whatever needs they have for their computer equipment.
Okay, and I assume that each of those constitutionals know that they need to make those requests to you and Zach.
We have
via this.
I think we have stated that to them, but we will reiterate that to them that's the process moving forward.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item is $348,000 for DCTV, and this is coming out of the non-departmental budget for the general fund, and that's for some of their operating expenses that were previously covered through their PEG fund, which is a special revenue fund, which had for a long time had a reserve, which they've now spent through most of it, and the revenue is not as high as it had been in the past. So this is really using some general fund dollars to supplement what they previously were able to purchase through the PEG fund. So this funding is for both operating expenses as well as equipment. The next line item is another item from the non-departmental general fund, and that's $1 million for unhoused assistance. And so that is kind of a to be determined what that funding will be used for. I think that's going to be part of the task of the housing officer to be able to go through and identify the best use for those funds, but we wanted to set that aside now within the budget, so we knew that we had some funding dedicated towards that. Next item is for the summer youth program. That's the program that is run by our WorkSource DeKalb department. And in previous years, we provided $400,000 for that program, which that is the same amount that was recommended in the original budget, but they were also able to supplement their budget in the last few years through ARP funding. And now that ARP funding is no longer available for that program, this is basically gap funding to make up for the funding that they lost through ARP.
Go ahead, Commissioner Davis-Johnson.
So this is in addition to what is already allocated in the budget for this program?
Right, so
Okay.
the total amount would be $702,000.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the next three items are, again, just those grant funds, so it's just basically recognizing that that is the funding that's available for this year for those various grants. Moving down, we're at the risk management fund now, and the funding recommended there is $87,000 for the healthcare advocate position. So that was a position that was funded last year in the budget, but when the budget was being created, it had not been filled, but they have identified a candidate, so we're just putting the funding back in for that position.
I'm sorry,
Go ahead, Commissioner Messiah.
And I'm sorry, so just to be clear, that position is presently, or those positions are presently vacant, and you're just trying to hold and allocate the funds for those vacant positions?
Correct. So the healthcare advocate position was funded in FY24, and they were actively recruiting that position. It's just in the request for FY25, it wasn't included, so this is putting the funding back for it so they can hire that position now.
All right, and so do we know a time frame or have a time frame as to when it's going to be filled, or has there been interviews, or were we?
I think they have qualified applicants, and I think they have who they would like to offer the position to, so this is just the final step to make sure the funding's available.
All right, thank you.
And just a quick comment on that. I do want to thank Mr. Jacobs for all of his hard work and establishing that position. That was an item that I sponsored back in 2023. And my understanding is that, yes, there has been someone identified. And also thank you, Mr. Williams. Go ahead, sir.
All right. The next item is a sanitation item, and this was more or less kind of a cleanup item. So if you'll recall, several years ago, there was a loan from the general fund to the sanitation fund of $10 million. And when we were calculating what the payback would be, we realized that the funding that was allocated towards that in this year's budget was short, so it's adding the additional funding to help pay back that loan to the general fund.
Thank you, Mr. Siegler. Commissioner Patrick has a question.
Yep. TJ, thank you for that. How much longer until that loan is repaid back to the general fund?
I will have to get back to you on that.
Okay.
I believe we did a 10-year repayment.
Okay.
And I think we're in year 2 or 3
Okay.
at this point.
I just wanted to get that information. Thank you.
Okay, next 3 items are for the stormwater fund. The first 2 are somewhat similar to the issue with the sanitation fund, where just reviewing the debt schedules, we realized that there were a couple of loans coming up that we needed to increase the line items for the stormwater fund. And then the third item for the stormwater fund is replacement of the county's salt and sand spreaders. So I believe we have 10 units, and then this would also be rehabbing several other units to serve that purpose. But they were purchased sometime, I think, after the snowstorm in 2014, and they weren't part of the vehicle replacement fund, and so they're in need of replacement at this point. So this would be funding to replace those units for use during, any sort of snow or ice storm. Okay. Next fund we're looking at here is the unincorporated fund. So there are 2 items. One is funding for gateway maintenance. So we've installed several different, landscaping installations around gateways to the county. And so this is just ongoing operating funding to maintain those gateway projects.
Commissioner Patrick has a question.
TJ, I apologize for having you go back up to that third item for stormwater, the salt and sand spreaders. So this you have is $2.7 million, and I just want to confirm this 2.7 is part of agenda item 2025-0147, which was $150,000.
I believe so. I can verify that, but I know that there was, we've been working with fleet management as well as with roads and drainage to get these items, 1 funded and then 2 ordered, because there's, quite a long lead time on these.
Understood. Okay. Just wanted to make sure these are connected, so thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Okay, and then the last item on the list for the CEO amendments is for the unincorporated fund, and it's a contribution to capital, $300,000, and that's for State Court Division B, the build-out on Memorial Drive. That's another kind of cleanup item. So at the end of last year, they had some funds remaining in their operating budget that they wanted to go towards that project. And so they had actually, part of one of the budget amendments we passed, reduced that funding out of their operating budget for last year. But we didn't make the transfer to the CIP fund. So this is just putting that funding back in. So it's reflected correctly for that project. Okay. And that brings us down to the FAB committee items. So the first item was recommended by the FAB committee. It was one of the requests from Commissioner Patrick. And this is funding for sidewalk repairs for a contractor to complete those. We put that funding within the designated services fund because that's the fund that's responsible for sidewalk repairs. So that's just a contribution from that fund, though, into a CIP account, so that money will be available for those sidewalk repairs. The next item, which we don't have a recommendation as part of today's budget, just because we're still working with the department on what the cost will be for FY25, and that's for the Claremont CSX Bridge Underpass graffiti remediation. So that we will bring back as part of our 30-day list that we discussed in the FAB committee.
Great, just one quick second.
Yes, ma'am.
TJ, so this is an item that will be placed on that 30-day list. So central staff, just make sure that lands on our agenda. Gotcha, awesome. Keep going, sir.
Okay.
Oop, hold on, Commissioner Bolton has a question.
And if you could, thank you, Madam PO. If you could go back up to the previous item for the sidewalk repairs, were those previously identified and we're just setting an amount to that?
So, and Commissioner Patrick can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the intent is that it's $50,000 per commission district.
Mm-hmm.
So it will be not exactly identified repairs, but it's if there are repairs, within your district that are identified, the funding will be available for that.
Okay, thank you so much.
If I may just follow up with your question, Commissioner Bolton. You will have residents that complain that there are segments that are so broken that they just need to be replaced. And so that was the intention of having that money there is unless you have a specific study that's been done that shows where everything is, as you have complaints that come up, it's there available. The next component to go with that, though, is to ensure that staff does have contractors available that can do that. I know in the past it's been contractors that can build new stuff, but not really contemplated going back and fixing old things. And so that would be the trick. The funding is one thing, but we got to get the contracts in place as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I was specifically concerned because on Glenwood, and Ms. O'Neill has brought this up several times, there's a gap in where we don't have any, and I was trying to see if that was the wiggle space that I needed.
It could be. If you go to the county's GIS website, there's a section that the District 1 Commissioner pushed to have sidewalk mapping put in place for the benefit of all DeKalb County residents. Tongue-in-cheek aside, the idea, though, is with that mapping tool in place, residents can say, hey, Commissioners, we know you're busy. Could you take a look at this segment right here? And then staff can come back, or we can come back ourselves and do an actual linear footage calculation of the estimated distance, and then talk with our staff about what the cost would be to get that done. So all of that was done with the intention of making it easier for us to be responsive to the residents' demands. Thank you.
Continue, sir.
All right. Moving down the list, we're back to the general fund. $50,000 for the court dog coordinator. Again, this was an item approved last year. I don't think it was ever identified for how that funding was going to be used, and so this is just putting the funding back in there, though, and I think the intent is just to have a point person, and it may not necessarily be a staff person, but someone that's able to help manage the any of the dogs that are being held at the animal shelter that are part of a court case.
TJ, so this was an item that we brought to the table last year, and I don't believe that role was ever filled. So thank you very much for including it into the administration's budget this year. So the idea and the notion behind this would be a position that would be housed in the law department to assist with working with the other attorneys and the courts and moving the dogs through the process faster and more seamlessly than they have been in the past. I just want to make that clear, that that's where at least we envision that being. And again, thank you for including it.
Okay. And I'll make sure that we also include that then our 30-day list, because that might, we might need to make an amendment to make sure that's clear that it's within the law department's
Yes,
budget.
sir. Thank you.
So the next two items are also for animal services. One is $100,000 for animal control training provided by the Georgia Humane Society. And the second is $150,000 for spay and neuter events.
And I can quickly speak on both of those items as well. The animal control training is specifically for our enforcement folks. Thank you for including that in the budget. And the second one for spay and neuter events are events that we can host this year related to spaying, more mass spaying and neutering events. Thank you, and I believe Commissioner Terry has a question.
Yeah, just for everyone following at home, so the first section, just to clarify, that TJ went over were CEO amendments, and then what we're going over now were actually amendments that were recommended by the FAB committee, just so everyone's clear.
Okay, so the next item on the list is from the Board of Commissioners, and it's for a child care reimbursement policy and program. The request was for $150,000, and after reviewing the memo that central staff had prepared on it, we felt that it would be helpful to have a little bit more time to spend with that to review it. And their recommendation from central staff was for it to be reviewed by the legal department, law department before implementation, and for the allocation from the budget to happen in next month. So we can put that on our 30-day list for review. The next several items are all related to the Board of Commissioners central staff. $17,600 for storage room build out, $5,500 for airfare, $1,500 for car rental, $12,000 for hotel, $5,250 for per diem, $14,000 for wireless, and then $6,000 for an automobile allowance for the chief of staff.
And very quickly, I'll speak to these items. When we reviewed the central staff budget with TJ and my team, we realized that some of the line items in the budget that was proposed by the administration, which you carried over from last year, they were just low. And so we thought it was important that we take a look at each item and then level them up to what is realistically the needs this year. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Next item is for the Community Service Board, or Claritel, and that's $120,000 for their unhoused plan. There's also a $450,000 contribution to CIP. That's for the East DeKalb Health Center renovation. So that houses both Claritel as well as the Department of Public Health. Next four items are the district attorney items. So there's $130,000 for software subscriptions for
TJ, briefly, we do have a question from Commissioner Patrick.
Hey, TJ, for that other one, the Claritel, the 450, is that through SPLOST?
So right now, the recommendation, we would put it through the general fund, but I think as we go through the CIP committee process, we might, reevaluate that, and if we want to move that to SPLOST, that could be a recommendation in the future.
Okay, I know we had, I think, $15 million allocated for the behavioral health through SPLOST for the crisis center. I just want to make sure we're understood. We just want to make sure the money's still there. That's all. Thank you.
And I just wanted to thank the FAB committee for supporting these two items. Thank you, sir. Please continue.
Okay. So back to the district attorney. The first
I'm sorry,
item.
sir. Commissioner Davis Johnson has a question.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I want to go back up to the animal control training. How many vacancies, if any, do we have for animal control officers?
I'd like to confirm that number, but if I recall correctly, it was either 5 or 6 vacancies last I checked. But I will make sure that we get the correct number to you.
Okay, thank you.
Please continue, sir.
Okay. So district attorney, they have 4 items. The first is $130,000 for software subscriptions for their digital forensics unit. There's also $164,000 for housing of evidence project and digitization of paperwork. There's $200,000 for 3 positions for the human trafficking grant funding. So I guess it's filling funding gap for some grant funded positions they have. And then $122,000 again for gap funding for cold case investigation positions. The next 2 items, these actually came from one of the amendments last year, what we called our Schedule C, which were requests from the Board of Commissioners for budget amendments. One is for the TREE Act, and the other is for the 10 portable message signs. The TREE Act is $100,000, and that's to have a program available to low-income residents that have a tree fall on their property or need assistance in addressing any problem trees on their property. And then the second is the 10 more portable message boards or message signs, $200,000, and that again is just to be able to deploy around the county if there's a need to have information for the public or if there are events or whatever the case might be.
So,
go ahead, Commissioner Davis Johnson.
Okay, when you say portable, 10 portable message signs, and you say fence around the county, I mean, could you be a little bit more detailed with that?
Well, I'll try. So my understanding is they would be like those digital signs that you see where you can put up a message, saying that, either, Board of Commissioners meeting, straight ahead, or if it would be.
Okay.
So they're the portable ones that would be by the side of the road.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Okay. Next 2 items are for the Solicitor General. The first is for their case management software system, $557,000. And the second is related to some renovations of office space on Camp Circle, and that's $61,963. The next 4 items, unless there's more, no, 6 items, excuse me, are for Superior Court. The first is $125,000 for additional judicial security. I think the request initially when they came to the FAB committee was for $250,000, but we had funded $125,000 already, so this is just the additional amount to get to the $250,000. Second item is for 2 court reporters. That's $197,547, and then 2 interpreters, which is $190,620. There's also $277,000 for other professional services, which that's within their court administrator cost center. So those were that was funding that was within last year's budget, which had been moved for another purpose, and it's just putting that funding back to that line item. Okay. The next 2 items are also other professional services for Superior Court. The first is for their accountability courts cost center, $173,000, and then the last is for $178,000 for the Project Pinnacle program, which is a youth diversion program.
Question?
Go ahead, Commissioner Terry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So all of these are Superior Court. Is that also including the state court? I know they're kind of sort of sharing, I think, some of the positions, but there was like a state court A and B line item.
Right.
But maybe it's captured in the Superior Court line item?
Yeah, you know,
I'm sorry,
I think
actually,
maybe.
you know what? I see it down below.
Okay.
Okay,
Right.
never mind on that point. Okay, so those are captured at the very bottom. You haven't got there
Correct.
yet. Madam Chair, I just wanted to acknowledge and appreciate our judges for attending the FAB committee on Friday. They were very transparent about the needs they have in the court system to ensure efficient court processes. And the longer that courts proceedings, hearings, paperwork are delayed means that people have to wait longer for justice or to, you know, seek justice. And so the investments here are tremendously important so that we don't have overcrowding in our jails. We don't have individuals waiting months and months and years for their day in court. So these positions, these administrative staff are there to increase the efficiency of the courts so that we have timely and efficient justice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Continue, sir.
All right. Next item is for voter registration and elections. They requested 6 new positions for $678,716. And so now moving on to the Police Services Fund, there are 2 items. One is a request for $200,000 for North Lake CID for off-duty police officers. And then the second is $325,000 for 5 license plate reader radar signs. So again, those would be portable signs that would be by the side of the road that could be used as both radar signs and for as license plate readers.
Go ahead, sir. Thank you. Oh, actually, Commissioner Davis Johnson has a question for you. Mike.
It seems like if I remember during the presentation, and maybe you can help me with this, Commissioner Terry, is the voter registration and elections office also requested money for storage. Yeah.
I don't recall that.
Do you recall that at the meeting?
Right. There was a request for vehicles, which was funded in FY24, so that's why that's been removed, because that funding was moved to, has been transferred to the vehicle replacement fund to purchase those vehicles.
Okay, well, maybe it was another office that requested storage. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Terry, did you want to respond to that? Nope, we're good. Okay, continue on, sir.
Okay. The next three items were all recommended by the FAB committee, and we're asking to be able to bring those back in 30 days just so we can identify the most appropriate funding source for those. So the first is for land acquisition at Arabia Mountain. The second is for the Stone Mountain Trail Program. And then the third is for the BOC Public Arts Plan. So for the first two items, we want to be able to look and see if there might be funding available in some of the old park bonds funds, any leftover funding there, or possibly SPLOST, or possibly our tourism product development capital funds that come from our hotel motel taxes. So we just want to be able to review all those different sources to make sure that we're using the most appropriate source for those purchases. And then for the BOC Public Arts Plan, somewhat similar. So we just want to be able to have some time to figure out how that would, where that funding would be housed and how it would be administered. I think two of the ideas that came up during the committee meeting were for either Discover DeKalb to manage that program, or for it to be housed within our Recreation Parks and Cultural Affairs Department. Okay, the item right below that, so this is for any appropriations from commissioners from 2024 that were not either dispersed during 2024. And what we've done is we've developed we have a memo drafted already, but we're just trying to fine tune it and put in some more specific language about dates and the process for getting that information to the administration so we can have it as part of the, either a separate agenda item or part of the 30-day list. So we should have that memo ready to be sent to everyone before the end of this week.
Go ahead, Commissioner Messiah.
And if I could, I'm sorry, so the memo has already been drafted, is that correct?
Right, so we're reviewing it though through the CEO's office, and also adding some of the specificity that was requested at the FAB committee about dates and timelines and just making sure that the process is as black and white as it can be.
And so as it relates to the appropriations themselves, those could be carried over, and there could be a separate email and a memo that is abundantly clear as to what the anticipation is from the administration moving forward, right?
Correct. That is the plan, is that we'll have a memo for all the commissioners to explain, one, any appropriations from last year, as well as any appropriations from the ARP interest, and any appropriations from the 2025 reserves as well. And it's just going to clarify some of the information that's been sent previously in memos, and also just outline the process moving forward.
Okay, and so can you just speak to what that is, just so that there's a clear understanding?
Clear understanding of the process?
Yeah, well, I understand there's going to be processes moving forward. Mm-hmm. However, I'd like to understand what the position is in terms of those 2024 appropriations that have not been carried over presently, that aren't visible. So again, it sounds like to me it's a two-step process. One is ensuring that those appropriations have been made or dispersed, because they have already been approved, right? So one, showing those, but then the other is the anticipation of the administration moving forward as to how they expect to address it. So can we speak to the appropriations themselves and the disbursement of those?
So I believe the recommendation from the FAB committee was for any appropriations that lapsed at the end of last year to be funded for FY25. But in order for us to do that, we need to identify which appropriations those are that lapsed. So the process that will be outlined is really for each commissioner in each district office to provide a listing of those items that they believe are outstanding from FY24. We will review that within OMB, and then we will have that either, as I said, as part of a separate budget amendment item, if it's ready to go, prior to the 30-day list, or we could bring it back as part of the 30-day list.
Okay,
I think those are the two best options available to us.
Right, because just to be clear, that is something, and I've already been clear in terms of my office we have done thus far previously. And so what I don't want is just to be kicking the can down the road and then not getting to ensure that they are appropriated or they're dispersed as they have been appropriated.
Thank you, Commissioner Messiah. Continue on, sir, please.
Okay. Moving down the list now to unincorporated fund. We have $100,000 for a tree survey. I believe that's for specifically starting in District 1 as kind of a pilot program, and it's to, I believe, any of the trees that are close to the roadways, evaluating those to see if there are any that could potentially pose a hazard or any danger to power lines, and developing a plan to address those.
If I may.
Go ahead, Commissioner Patrick.
Thank you, and TJ, you're correct. The specific instance that sort of this conversation was, I guess, in early 21. There was a storm that took out a traffic light, flashy yellow light at Hawthorne and Briarcliff, and it took several years to get that back in place. And no sooner had it been put back in place than another storm came through and knocked it all out, plus the crosswalk signs that were there. So I intend to put those signs back in place, but I figured before we do that, it would probably be wise on certain roads to be able to say we know specifically these trees that are in the rights of way are problematic, and we should probably have a conversation about getting them taken down. I know trees can be very sensitive and people getting passionate about that, so following something Commissioner Terry had put forward is also contemplation on replanting those trees, collaborating with Georgia Power to make sure that it's the type of tree that doesn't become problematic if there's another storm. So this is sort of a first step in multi-step approach to address this issue.
All right, thank you, sir. Continue on, please.
The next two items, well, if I can go just back to the tree survey for just a moment. We put that within non-departmental and unincorporated just because we'll need to develop how that program works and who will actually be administering it. So it could be part of beautification, it could be part of actually planning since they have arborists, or it could be, any number of things. So that's why it's in the non-departmental for the time being. So the funding is there, and then we can decide later, how that will actually be implemented.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
So the next two items are still in the unincorporated fund. They are for State Court Division B. The first is funding for a court administrator. The dollar amount is $214,689. And then the second is for other positions, so 2 court reporters, 3 deputy clerks, 2, and 1 deputy clerk, 1. The amount for that is $326,519.
I have a question on that.
Go ahead, Commissioner Terry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, TJ, can you explain the rationale for the court, state court B, these line items not being funded out of the general fund instead of the unincorporated fund? Because the courts are county-wide services, correct?
Yes, with the exception of Division B. Oh. So Division B is the successor court to Recorder's Court.
Okay.
So they handle mostly traffic violations, and they might have a few ordinance cases, but I think that's mostly magistrate court.
You're welcome. Commissioner Davis Johnson has a question.
Yes, I think I may have missed it. The 2024 appropriations, that's where monies that we approved last year that was taken out of our budget, and we talked about it going back in. Is that item?
Yes, ma'am. So the plan is that we have drafted a policy or a memo outlining the process for that going forward, as well as for any of the items that were may have lapsed at the end of last year. And we're just kind of fine-tuning that memo right now. And so we plan to send that out before the end of this week, and then we will either be able to address that maybe the next meeting, or, at the very least, probably by the 30-day window that we had for the other items.
Okay. What about the money that was taken out that was approved? I understand that you did say that you were going to send memos explaining the process. But what about the monies that was approved, that we allocated, but it was taken out?
Right. The intent for this last time in 2025 would be to go on and account for those funds and provide for a reappropriation, for lack of a better word. But the intent has been and will be, and this is what the memo will lay out, is that these operating funds don't roll over. We recognize that there was a host of reasons this past year, and there maybe have been some in past years, but in 2025, our objective will be to set some clear guidelines and timelines that will be articulated in this memo that TJ is talking about, so that come October, notwithstanding, I know that there may be special events but that would be planned for, but there's a cutoff time period that we all work towards and then adhere to, so that we don't find ourselves in a circumstance where we're literally trying to get contracts at the end of the year.
Yeah, and I do understand about the contracts, but it's my understanding, TJ, that the money must be spent by the end of the year.
Yes, that's what we're, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Objective.
Okay, thank you.
To have it all spent. And while I have the floor, could I add one more quick thing, and this is as it relates to the ARP interest. And I was going to dovetail on the sidewalk conversation, something that we have reallocated, the board reallocated those funds. What I would love to do is strongly encourage, as we look at how those funds are spent, infrastructure needs. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities in sidewalks, stormwater, if the board would, consider those first in terms of prioritizing the spend, just because time and again, there are instances where there may be things in districts that just aren't on the high enough on the list because we do worse first, right? But they are significant to your constituents and to areas. And so there have been instances where commissioners have allocated funds for stormwater projects, small stormwater projects, or sidewalk projects. I would just encourage us to continue that, because that really helps.
And one other point that I would like to make, and I would like to say this because those funds would be discretionary with the commissioners. Is that?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Because I have, I have put roughly $400,000 to $500,000 rehabbing Lou Walker Senior Citizens Facility, which I think is a county effort, but it has not been renovated. Money's, well, I won't say it has not been any money's put in
that
it.
type of infrastructure.
But
too,
yeah, that type of infrastructure was needed because it was falling apart, in my opinion. So I just wanted to make clear that we have, because those are the things that I look at in my district, what is beneficial for the constituents, which could include some of the infrastructure that you talked
And it
about.
could be buildings
But
as
just
well,
wanted to make sure that it was at discretion.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Davis Johnson. Commissioner Messiah does have a comment as well, but before I go to her, I just want to make sure that in that memo that you address this specifically. So if we make an appropriation at the second business meeting of the final month of the year, so the second business meeting in December, and if those funds aren't spent, so say the meeting's on December 18th, and those funds aren't spent by the 31st, what happens? Just please address that as simply as you can in your memo.
Yes, so based on, this is really a generally accepted accounting, practice, that any funds that are appropriated for operating lapse at the end of the year. So, and I'll choose a different example besides something, from this reserve for appropriation. If you have funding for operating supplies in your budget, and you don't spend all the funding in that line item, what's left over there does not then automatically roll over into that line item for the next year. It falls to the fund balance. And then if there is, one issue that we deal with, again, outside of the reserve for appropriation, is that there are encumbrances that get created late in the year because departments order something and it's not received until, the next year. And that is another situation where we have to reappropriate the funds. They do not automatically roll over as part of the budget process. So that's really what we're talking about here, is the reappropriation of anything that was in the 24 budget that was not spent, whatever appropriation was not spent for that.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Messiah.
Yes, and I appreciate that response. Again, and just for the benefit of the public in terms of some of the challenges towards the end of the year, as you know, we had at least 2 new commissioners that came in, and we came in as a result of a special election. So essentially, we just had shy of about 2 weeks or so in order to reestablish our office. We had no budget at that point. And so we had to get up and running ASAP. Additionally, there were allocations that could be made to organizations. So I know that myself and my colleague, Commissioner Bolton, jumped in immediately to allocate funds and to reestablish our offices. And so that may have created some lag, but I do understand also that in part it's been kicked down the road, and that's just the reality of it. Again, I understand a memo as it relates to outlining what's expected moving forward, but as it relates to the funds presently that the board has appropriated for 2024, what's expected specifically to happen to those funds?
They would be reappropriated in 2025.
Okay, so what you're saying, they would be lost and take out of our budget?
No, ma'am.
Okay, all right, got it.
They would be, in addition to the budget, they would be a budget amendment for those items. So it would not be part of the 2025 reserve that's already incorporated into the budget. It would be an amendment to the budget to fund those items.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And then as it relates to line 3, and I'm sorry, TJ, to take you back up there, where the grants, the confiscated funds, were those confiscated funds that were grants that were sourced through the CEO's office directly, or were there grants that were throughout other departments?
So they're throughout other departments. So
Okay.
I believe that the police department, sheriff, DA all share in the confiscated funds. And there may be other departments too that I'm not aware of. So in our office does not manage the grant funds. So that's, again, one reason why it wasn't in the original document. So I'm not sure I can provide much more detail than that, but we can get that for you if you have additional questions.
Okay. And then in terms of the economic development, so looking at some of the decreases, so in terms of Decide DeKalb, there's a reduction, a proposed production for Decide DeKalb at about $1.6 million. Is that correct?
Well, so it's not only for Decide DeKalb. So the economic development budget supports Decide DeKalb. There's also funding, or has been funding in the past, for the Chamber of Commerce, and funding for the Land Bank. And so we have several of those requests that we've begun review with Madam CEO about. I think one thing to keep in mind with this process this year, the difference is that we have a new CEO, a new administration, and we had very short period of time to review the requests that we received. So we're going to be continuing to go through those requests and coming back with recommendations on that. But I believe so the funding that fell off, I know that one part of it was the land bank funding, because we want to see more about the information of how they're using their funds and when they think they'll be able to start to generate any revenue and be able to fulfill their mission. And I'd have to get back to you on the other amount. But
And I
believe that's
appreciate
700,000.
that. In the spirit of brevity, though, and I don't want to take up too much time because I do have one other quick question. But so as it relates to Decide DeKalb, that's a yes. That's specifically related to DeKalb. There's a $1.6 million correction. Reduction. Is that a yes or
No,
it's
that's a
not?
no. So the economic development budget funds Decide DeKalb. We have an IGA with them, which is funded through that. And so the IGA is funded, fully funded through that. There are other organizations that are also supported through the economic development budget. As I mentioned in the past, it's been the Chamber of Commerce as well as the Land Bank. And so there might have been requests for funding from Decide DeKalb that was not recommended, but that is not the entirety of that budget. It is not for Decide DeKalb.
Okay, we'll follow up on that one a little later. I appreciate it. In terms of the economic development TAD funds, so there are 2 TADs that have a fund sheet and 3 that do not. So Columbia Drive TAD and Druid Hills TAD have a fund sheet, but Kensington, Market Square, and Southwest DeKalb do not.
And when you say a fund sheet, you're referring to the budget document?
Correct.
Okay. If that's the case, it was an oversight, but it's the funding for those funds, again, are a bit different than most of what's in the operating fund because those are custodial funds. So those have to be collected by the tax commissioner and then they come to the county, but they're really kind of a pass-through that will then go towards whatever the purpose for, that the TAD boards, use those funds for.
All right. And lastly, in terms of planning and sustainability, there's proposed reductions there as well. Is that as far as we're seeing here?
So I believe probably what you're seeing for the most part in that is the development fund. And the issue there is that their revenue has not been able to keep up with expenses. So we're going to have to come back and look at ways to increase the revenue. And then really the reduction, though, is a reduction in the amount of our administrative charges that we charge to the development fund. So it's kind of as we've done this in the past for various funds, if we know that they're sort of in a crunch and we're trying to work on increasing their fees or their revenue amounts, that we will suspend those on a temporary basis and then be able to kind of come back in subsequent years once that issue has been worked out and reinstate those charges. So it should not impact their operating. If anything, it would just impact our revenue on the general fund side.
All right, I appreciate that, especially since that being a department has had, some challenges and some great opportunities. With seeing a reduction in funding is a bit of a concern, but I'm certain that the administration, you guys are working through that. I appreciate you.
Great. I believe there's one item left on your list, sir.
Yes, ma'am. So the final item is for the Watershed Operating Fund, and it was a request from Commissioner Davis Johnson for $800,000 for the Independent Watershed CIP Audit Office.
Great. Thank you, sir. All right. Commissioner Bolton and then Commissioner Terry.
Thank you. And my question is with respect to the state court positions. And hopefully you would be able to answer some of these. It's a bit detailed, I would say. So I see here we are looking forward to funding some additional positions. And so do you have the dollar amount for the state court clerk's salary?
I can see if I can. I know we do. I don't have it readily available, but I'll see if I can pull it up quickly. Okay. But the request that, again, was made directly from the state court to the FAB committee. And it's related to just not having funding for those positions. And I think it's perhaps they'd been funded in the past, but there's been some efforts, both by, kind of a joint effort between our office and Human Resources to try to clean up some of the positions, so they might have been, caught up in that inadvertently. So I think that's what you may be seeing there is putting that funding back.
Okay.
I guess ultimately, I was going to ask several questions, but the overarching question, I know the admin, it was mentioned before that she was doing both the clerk and the admin position. And so the judges were looking forward to separating those two roles and hiring someone to do the jobs independently of each other, and was trying to determine if and when those positions are separated, will they still be looking forward to increasing the salary for the clerk in addition to bringing in an admin, and was just trying to determine how those numbers are reflected in this sum.
We can follow up with the state court to find out if that's still part of their plan. I think at this point, we're only recommending the funding for the administrator position, not recommending funding for additional salaries for other positions.
Gotcha. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Commissioner Terry, then Commissioner Messiah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. TJ, back to the State Court Division B. I seem to remember that when Judge Jacobs was here, that they were talking about these positions as supporting sort of multiple courts. So is Division A going to be supported by these positions, and are those
I think
separate?
if I recall correctly, is that maybe the reporters and the positions that are supposed to support Division A have also been supporting Division B. So this is dedicated staff that would support Division B to allow the Division A staff to remain on, the cases coming to Division A.
Okay. And is Division A also unincorporated fund?
No, so Division A is general fund because it is the county-wide. So they've changed the naming terminology a few times with those. So it used to be general fund was state court jury division, and then it was the unincorporated fund was state court traffic division, and I think they changed that several years ago to Division A and Division B, just because it wasn't quite accurate to call Division B traffic court because they do handle some other matters.
Okay. Well, if it's possible, if we could just, in the next, that 30-day window, just clarify sort of the interplay between A and B, and that's more just sort of a funding source separation. And I did think that the FAB committee was approving the grade change for one of the positions that Judge Jacobs mentioned. But you're saying that's not in this one. Is that going to be a 30-day
So we can
back?
definitely review that as part of the 30-day.
Okay.
But yeah, I was going based on my notes as well as the notes shared with central staff. So
Okay,
I
if we
did not
could
see
just-
that, but it's possible.
Okay, well, just for the FAB committee team, let's just verify that, because I know that was a point of contention, and it's more just trying to keep up with what the market, is paying for these positions. And I think that grade change was just basically trying to keep up with, what folks are paying around the metro area. Real quick on the speed humps maintenance fund. So starting fund balance over 1 million, charges for services, which is revenue, 343,000, but then actually doing the work is 600,000. So I think in the years past we've tried to keep those sort of as even as possible, but it does appear that this year we're whittling down the fund balance from 1 million to 750,000.
So typically you're correct that those have been more or less in line, the revenue and the expenditures. I think it was 2 years ago, so probably 2023, they wanted to do some additional work within that fund, and so we increased the budget. But the actuals have actually not been as high as the budget has been. So there's sort of I don't want to say mismatch, but we've maintained that level of funding to allow them to get through more of their backlog or any work that needs to be done. But we don't anticipate the actual expenditures to be as high as the revenue, or the budgeted expenditures.
Okay, but I think the general concern with the status of the Speed Humps Maintenance Fund is that when it was created 25 years ago, the fee hasn't changed, but the realities of actually installing and maintaining these has. And so the big concern I have, because we do get a lot of speed traffic calming requests, is that as we add more and more, we actually don't have enough money coming in every year to do the true installation. And I'm just generally aware of some traffic calming humps that look like they really could be, they need to be maintained and renovated, they're falling apart. But if we were to, maintain and upgrade all of them, we would literally run out of money, immediately. So, I just, this is a general statement, you have to respond to it for Zach and the transportation department, is we really need to get that traffic calming consultant study going so we can just look at the whole picture, how much we're charging for the fee, a realistic assessment, and then as we continue to hear just different options than just the speed humps. And I might even suggest that we just change the name of this to the Traffic Calming Maintenance Fund, because I think there's maybe like 5% that aren't humps necessarily, but I think that'd be my suggestion. And then lastly, I do want to acknowledge, just because we're going to talk about this later in the day, with the watershed operating and the water and sewer rate discussion, Commissioner Davis-Johnson did introduce the CIP Audit Office. We do have that resolution and agenda item in the FAB committee this afternoon. If we have time to get to it, we'll get to it. And so we haven't completely flushed out the confines of sort of what that role will be, but we wanted to make sure that we recommended approval of this funding because the committee did think it was an important one to establish the funding. And then once the job description to office is further refined, the funding will be available. But I guess just from the general perspective for you, TJ and Zach, if there aren't any new funds available via water and sewer rate, there's no way to implement this CIP office because this is incumbent upon new revenues coming in.
This is incumbent on new revenues coming in.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, hold on real fast, Commissioner Davis-Johnson, and then I will recognize you in just a moment. So, folks, I just want to call everybody's attention to where we're at in the agenda and the time. It's presently 12:35 p.m. We're at the top of page 3. We are still in public hearing. So brevity would be appreciated. Okay, let me go to Commissioner Messiah. She's been holding, and then you can follow up. Thank you.
Okay, just really quickly, in terms of the automobile allowance or allowance for staff in general, so that's $500 a month. And I will note that as a commissioner, the Org Act allows us $300, I believe, for all expenses. And so my acts and my friendly amendment to the budget is that the commissioner's allowance commiserates with the same as the rest of the Board of Commissioners to be $500 a month. So if you could speak to that, that'd be great.
Commissioners, this is again one of those where I volunteer to serve as tribute. We're going to need to discuss that offline.
Okay. All right. Fantastic. Thank you.
All righty. We have exhausted the amendments that were proposed. So let me go back again and read where we're at on the agenda. Top of page 3, it's item 2025-0185. This is to adopt the 2025 annual budget. Again, a public hearing item. Is there anyone present who would like to speak in support or favor of this item? Again, I'll repeat that. If anyone is here to speak in support or in favor of the budget, please come to the podium. Seeing none, is there anyone who would like to oppose this item, the 2025 budget? If so, please come to the podium, one at a time. I will repeat, is there anyone in our audience that would like to come to the podium to speak in opposition of this item, which is the 2025 budget? All righty, if we could have staff come back to the podium, please read your recommendation. And commissioners, note that this is a substitute. If you'd please just address the substitute, which I'm assuming is the amendments.
Yes, that's correct. So staff recommendation is to adopt the substitute, which incorporates the amendments that were just reviewed.
All right, do we have a motion?
Motion to approve the substitute.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, Commissioner Terry has moved to approve. Commissioner Johnson has seconded. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor? Let's hit the machines. All righty, unanimously passed. Again, thank you so much to the administration, particularly CEO Cochran-Johnson for your hard work, and to TJ. Now, TJ, please go take a holiday. Item 0272, Commission Districts, all districts, House Bill 581, opt-out resolution. Please, Mr. County Attorney, come to the podium.
As a quick reminder, Commissioners, this is the item to opt out. So you would vote no, or you would withdraw this item if you wanted to opt in.
Can we pull that, please?
Yes, sir. Let's pull that item. Now, don't let me forget. Thank you, Mr. County Attorney. Yep,
So
we're on.
now you can go ahead with 0272.
Okay,
because
yes,
you did
ma'am.
pull it.
All right, I've read that into the record. We do
Yes.
have a motion from Commissioner Terry. We have a second from Commissioner Bolton to withdraw. Any comments on this item,
It
Commissioners?
just looks like on the machine, it's got 0232 on the machine.
That was deferred.
Got it. There it is.
0232
All right, it's
was
updated, thank you.
deferred.
All right, I hit the button again.
Okay, let me repeat that for everyone following along. And again, I apologize, folks. We're at 2025-0272, House Bill 581, opt-out resolution. Commissioner Terry has moved to withdraw this item. Commissioner Bolton has seconded. Would you like to say something, County Attorney, before? Okay, all right. Machines are open. Let's vote.
And 0232.
All right, 0272 has been withdrawn. Moving on to Board of Commissioners, item 2025-0271, all commission districts opting in to House Bill 581. Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve item 0271.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, Commissioner Terry has moved to opt in to House Bill 581. Commissioner Patrick has seconded. Any questions, any comments? Nope, doesn't appear to be anything. Nope, okay, we're good. All right, let's open the machines to vote. Fantastic. All right, let's keep moving right along. Thank you all. Motion passes to opting in to House Bill 581. Again, I truly appreciate the administration hosting the public hearing meeting so that our citizens had an opportunity to provide input, as well as I really appreciate you guys setting up the overflow room and really trying to address questions during our meeting today.